Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine18 Tarot and Books. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome or welcome back. This is a VR to the tag How Do You Tarot by Lady Knight of Avalon. This is a tag that I really like. I really like these 10 questions. I've enjoyed a number of VRs as well as, of course, the original video, and I've kind of had it on my list of tags to do for quite some time. I think I might be like 6 months late at this point based on when this tag came out. But I've seen the VRs kind of trickling out since, of course, the original was posted, and I'm happy to do a VR late and extend the life of the tag because these are the kinds of questions that I'm interested in hearing answers for from other folks. So I was happy to make a VR myself. There's 10 questions, and I'll timestamp below because you know, if you've been here before, that I'm not succinct. So, number 1, what do you like about tarot? I like a lot of things about tarot. And for folks who are perhaps unfamiliar, I also work with geomancy, oracle. I've dabbled a little bit in Lenormand and in playing cards, but I would describe myself as not particularly proficient in either. Dominoes, dice, all of these things I enjoy and work with to varying degrees. And what I like about tarot is certainly that it has a structure. I struggled a lot with Oracle at first because I didn't really know what to do with it, having worked with tarot first and, knowing the system of kind of suits and majors versus minors. Looking at Oracle decks that didn't seem to have anything like that, I kind of baffled me. I like systems that have more of a structure to them, so I like that about tarot very much. I also like when creators mess with that structure a little bit. I like extra cards and things like that, but I really like the kind of core, that there is a kind of structure that tarot decks have enough in common to make them all tarot decks, if that makes sense. I like that tarot and some of the associations with things like the suits can connect with systems of associations I work with in other contexts. I like, for example, thinking about the minor arcana in very much an elemental way, and elemental associations are also something that I work with in druidry context as well. So I like that those connections and overlaps exist. I really like that tarot has representative artwork. I like looking, at a tarot deck and seeing, and this is a Tarot Defomantic, seeing imagery of the world, and what the world looks like. Compared to, for example, some of the other divinatory tools that I work with, OM is basically an alphabet. There are OM decks, of course, including my own, that have imagery on them, usually imagery of trees and plants. But you don't tend to get very, representative, pictorial OM decks, and I mostly actually read OM staves, so there's not much representation there. Geomancy, similarly, it's systems of 1 dot and 2 dots making up geomancy figures. You don't get the range of the kinds of imagery that you get with something like tarot or oracle as well. So I really like that about tarot too. I like that there are so many different interpretations of tarot and so many different kind of artistic angles in all of the many, many, many tarot decks. I think that, some systems like geomancy is maybe the most obvious one. There's only in my head so many ways that I could imagine having 16 geomancy figures depicted. Whereas tarot, it's like the possibilities are infinite, and I really love that. I feel like for me, the different imagery in different decks does impact how I read and gives me new angles on things and gives me new angles on what the tarot cards mean, and different flavors to reading. So I like that about tarot. And I like about tarot that it has brought some great friendships into my life as well through Tarot Tube and elsewhere. So I like all of those things about tarot. Question number 2, what do you use tarot for? I use tarot for lots of things. I would say that mostly I work with tarot to prompt reflection, or to kind of prod me to look at things in a different angle than I might look at them with no kind of prompt. I find doing readings for myself about issues that are bothering me, or decisions that I have to make, or things that are upcoming in my life that I want to know how to navigate in the best way, or just digging into how I'm feeling about something. If I can't quite articulate how I'm feeling about something, I find tarot to be really great for all of these things. And I journal with my tarot readings as well. I always write them down to some extent. So I find tarot really good for kind of prompting that kind of reflection and poking me to kind of think in a slightly different direction than I might have thought of otherwise. I use tarot to kind of check in with myself, check in with the kind of energetic weather of the day, if you will, or the month or the year. I use tarot to try to discern what will happen in my near future if I continue along the trajectory that I'm on, and what some other possibilities might be. I use tarot to help me make decisions, drawing some cards for each possible option and using that as a jumping off point to help me think about a choice I might have to make. I have used tarot in conjunction with meditation, at some points meditating on concepts chosen by drawing a card. I've done, other kind of things like looking at tarot birth cards and things like this. It's not quite tarot reading, but I like exploring these different kind of aspects of tarot. So I like finding new ways to incorporate tarot into my life, really. Anything and everything. Question number 3, what is your go-to workhorse deck, the one you can read with no matter what? I would say there's a handful of these for me that are workhorse decks that I can work with no matter what. The one that I chose here to show is the Fifth Spirit Tarot by Charlie Claire Burgess. I really like this deck. This is a deck that I very happily will read with for myself and or for others. I find that, my friends tend to like this deck. If I have a few to pick from, it's a frequently chosen one. I find it to be very multi-purpose. There are definitely certain decks in my collection that I might not go to, or might be more inclined to go to when I'm feeling a particular way or dealing with a particular thing. And this is not one of those. This feels like a deck that can do anything to me. I am a big fan. Love this deck. So that's my workhorse. Question number 4. What is your, for you personally, most difficult deck to work with and why? That's an interesting question. I find decks to maybe have difficulty levels, and certainly that would be individual to some extent. The one that I picked for this is La Flora Tarot. And for folks who haven't seen La Flora Tarot, this is one that has a plant or flower on every card. And I'm just taking out some extra cards here. So the plant is labeled, and so is the card. So you can see, it's the Chariot, and then you can see it's Beach Mango. And the Latin name is there as well. So all of the cards have that. And the reason that to me this is the most difficult deck, and why I would show it for this question, is because this is the deck that for me in my collection, and maybe the only one, that I would say that I am very guidebook dependent for this one. I think that the biggest strength of this deck is the thoughtfulness with which the plants and flowers were paired with the tarot. And the guidebook is great and really gets into the details of these different associations that plants and flowers have based on their medicinal properties, based on kind of cultural references, based on mythology, all kinds of things. It's got a big bibliography in there, really well done. And so this to me is my most difficult because I want to incorporate those aspects into my reading, and I don't know plants nearly well enough to be able to draw on my own personal knowledge to just know anything about all of these associations. I want to go to the book every time. So that, I would say, would make this the most difficult. Now, could I read this and kind of just set the intention ahead of time and say, well, I'm going to read it like a Smith Waite and just do that with the card titles? I suppose. But I would be, I think, missing out on what makes this deck awesome. So it's my most difficult deck for that reason. And the creator has La Flora Oracle on Kickstarter right now, which is also beautiful. So if you love this deck, check it out. Question number 5. Which decks or deck do you want to study in depth but haven't gotten around to it yet? I'm a study person. I could have picked a lot of decks for this one because I like studying things. What can I say? And I'm going to pick the Great Lakes Tarot. I love this deck. I love reading with this deck. And I live and have really always lived, except for kind of brief couple of months here and there, I've always lived in the Great Lakes region. So these are familiar places to me. They're familiar animals to me. It feels like home, this deck. But I want to study it further because I'm not the best at plant and flower identification. And this deck doesn't come with a guidebook. There is a list of what is depicted on each card online, but I really want to kind of make my own little zine style guidebook for this with some of the things that I know about each animal or plant or place incorporated in, which would mean getting to spend a lot of additional time with this deck and getting to know it even better. So that's a deck that I would like to study more, and I can read with it right out of the box, and I'm happy to, and I've been enjoying that, but I would like to spend some more deliberate time for sure. Question number 6. What is your preferred deck style in terms of artwork, and has it changed over time? So just, the decks that I've shown, just getting a sense here. I don't know if I have a preferred art style, honestly. I don't think I have a preferred art style. Clearly, I'm all over the place here. I've got, a very contemporary style. I've got kind of color blocked style. I've got photographs there, and I've got black and white botanical there. I don't think I have an art style. I have a collection that is all over the place, honestly, in terms of artwork. I have decks that are painted, that are drawn, that are photographic, that are collaged. I've got one that's like stitched fabric and photos of that. I don't have an art style. I have themes, I would say, that I go for. I really like TWS LGBTQ plus centric decks, and in terms of my deck shelf, that's a kind of area that is well represented. I do like nature-based decks, I would say. Decks that focus on landscapes or just have a lot of kind of outdoor imagery. I'm quite attracted to. I do quite like black and white decks. I like decks that are weird shapes, including round, but not limited to round. I like mini decks and I like huge decks. I'm really, really all over the place. Has my preferred art style changed over time? I would say yes and no. I don't know that my I apparently like everything art style has changed, but definitely what I look for in a deck has changed. I think that over the decades that I've engaged with tarot, I have broadened my interests. Certainly, incorporating learning something about Pip decks and Marseille has kind of opened a world of decks that I wouldn't have considered very early on in my tarot journey. I really gravitate towards Pip or Pip-ish kind of decks now. So that has changed. I would also say that now somehow my taste has kind of consolidated in that now I feel very much like I can look at a deck that's gorgeous, that I love the artwork for, and know whether it's going to work for me or not. And there are decks that are beautiful, whose artwork I love, that I would hang on my wall, that I don't think would work for me in terms of my reading style. And there are decks that maybe have artwork that I would not hang on my wall that work fabulously for me in a reading. And so I think I've become more discerning and better understanding of my own reading style to be able to know whether a particular deck is going to work for me. Certainly, there are decks, like I really like photographic decks a lot. I wouldn't have touched a photo deck like Duffomantic as a total tarot beginner. I wouldn't have known what to do with that, but now I do. And so I really, gravitate towards that. But I wouldn't say my art taste has changed. Question number 7, what question would you never ask the tarot? So I feel like this is probably a really tired answer, but I would never ask the tarot a medical diagnostic question. Do I have X, Y, or Z? Or like, what is this symptom telling me? Like anything like that. And I feel like folks, a lot of people I think agree with that to a strong extent, particularly for reading for others. Certainly there are like legislative reasons that in many places you can't do a kind of medical diagnostic or advice tarot reading, like not legally as a professional, right? But for me, as somebody who reads primarily for myself, I would never ask the tarot a kind of medical question. Dealing with generalized anxiety, that has sometimes manifested for me in hyper scrutiny of my own body and hypochondria and fear of medical interactions in various kinds of ways that have been really, really difficult. And so I feel like even if I might not have a necessarily ethical concern with doing a kind of medical reading for myself, I still wouldn't, because I don't think it would be good for me. I would never do a reading like that for somebody else, because I think that there's just, ask the questions to the right professional. The tarot professional is not the professional for that kind of question, unless there's some like medical doctor out there who's using tarot in their practice, which I can't possibly imagine. Like that just wouldn't happen. But I just, no. Expertise exists, and medical questions should be directed to people who have that expertise. I'm not one of those people. I'm not going to ask those kind of questions for myself. I think it would just really ramp up my anxiety if I did. So that's a no. Question number 8. When you read for yourself, what do you look for? What kinds of questions do you ask? What do I look for when I read for myself? I look for a deck to use that suits my mood. Sometimes I look for a spread. Sometimes I make a spread with defined spread positions, but a lot of the time when I read for myself, I kind of freestyle with either kind of 3 cards or 6 or 9. For some reason, I like multiples of 3. Sometimes I like a 4-card reading for myself. And I have a few I'm sure most people who read for themselves have a few kind of go-to smaller spreads that they can ask, questions. And so I like that. I ask all kinds of questions, and I feel like this just goes back to the question about what do I use tarot for? I ask questions that help me navigate day-to-day living. I ask questions about, what's going on kind of energetically around me right now, and how can I best navigate that? I ask, questions like whether there's anything I need to be particularly aware of today, or particularly, open to today, or something that I should particularly be focused on, or that I should be particularly, not on guard for, but like particularly on the lookout for, in a particular day or in a particular instance, if you will. I ask what I might need to know about, again, various options in a decision. I find tarot to be really useful in decision making. I don't let my cards make decisions for me, but I do find them to be a very useful tool to explore possibilities and to think about ramifications of various choices. So I really like using it for that. I ask about how I could best bring about something that I want to happen. I also ask the opposite kind of questions of how can I best proceed in order to avoid a particular kind of undesired scenario or outcome. So that's useful to me. I ask questions about whether, something's going to happen or what's going to happen and how I can prepare for that, and where I might have room to change that, because I don't believe the future is fixed. I think that we can absolutely predict. I think that we predict all the time. My go-to example is that if I have a test tomorrow, and I choose to drink 10 beers tonight, I can predict that I'm going to do worse than if I chose to study tonight, right? Like, that's a prediction. It's probably going to hold, right? I can, we rely on weather forecasts every day, right? When we decide whether to bring an umbrella, prediction is definitely useful. I do think that prediction for me has to be kind of, if I continue along my current trajectory as of this moment, what might happen, right? Because the second the reading is done, I think you can start acting to change that outcome. And also there's lots of other things that we can't control that could also happen right after the reading is done that could completely change the outcome too. So I think that, prediction is useful with those kind of caveats around it. I also ask tarot a lot of questions around my spiritual life, around my emotional life, how I can best support myself, how I can best care for myself, what I might need to be told by the tarot that I need in a particular moment. Those are all things that I find to be really useful. Question number 9, after all the things you've learned about the tarot so far, is there something else about tarot that you want to study or research or learn? Always. I'm a nerd, actually. I like to study things. So I feel like tarot is big enough that the opportunities for study never really end. There's always a new deck to deep dive with, there's always a new book to explore. And I love that. I feel, very, proficient in Smith-Waite at this point. I feel fairly proficient in Marseille, though certainly, I would like to read a bit more in terms of Marseille. And I also have an interest in exploring kind of playing cards, which is not tarot, but it's adjacent. So I would like to study more there. I also am really interested in, any kind of collective learning opportunities. So I'm always kind of interested to see what's happening in terms of tarot workshops or study groups or book clubs, anything like that. I quite enjoy, and I find that no matter how long I think you've been doing something, no matter how long you've been reading tarot, you can always learn from things like that, provided obviously that you go in with an open mind and the attitude of desiring to learn. I think if you go into something with the attitude that you know everything already, then you're not going to learn anything, and it's not because you already know everything. So yes, there are things I want to study, research, and learn. I'm figuring out what those things are all the time, and I'm really mostly interested in learning and studying and researching with other people, because I find that to be really interesting and enjoyable, and a good way to make friends. I'm awkward, and so having an activity to talk about, or a topic or a book or something Like that's a good friend making venture in my opinion. And tarot friends are great. Number 10, and the final question. What advice would you give someone who's just starting to learn tarot? This one I kind of have a pre-made answer for, because I feel like it's come up quite a few times in my life. What would I advise someone who's just starting to learn? I would advise them to pick a deck that speaks to them, that makes them want to pick up the cards and work with them. You know, pick a deck that they can see themselves in. Pick a deck that is on a theme that they are interested in or that they're attracted to. Pick something with an art style that they really, really enjoy looking at. Whatever that means, pick the deck that is the deck that appeals to you. Number 1. Number 2, multiple perspectives. Don't just go with one book. Get 2. I will be a book enabler. Or YouTube or blogs or whatever kind of source works for you and is accessible to you. Go with multiple perspectives, because nobody is the, be all end all authority on these kinds of things. And so I think having multiple angles is always a good thing, right? In terms of learning. And the other thing that I would suggest in terms of somebody just starting to learn tarot is that if you are learning tarot by doing card of the day, which I think a lot of people do because a lot of books suggest it. If you're learning by doing a card of the day or a 1-card draw in the morning, any of those kinds of card a day or 1-card draw ways of learning, up it to 2 cards. Because, I find, at least for me personally, trying to learn anything, with a 1 card or a single draw, whether that be OM or tarot or geomancy or any of the rest of it, when you're doing a kind of single reading like that, it ends up feeling like flashcards. And, the reading ends up being, like, at least in my experience, very keyword centric and less centered on the question that you asked. It's harder to get out of the just pure rote memorization, I think, with a single card draw. So I would always nudge someone who's new to tarot towards like a 2-card reading so that they can start thinking about how those cards are interacting with each other and speaking to each other, and how do the 2 cards combine in the answer to the question. Even if the question is something really, really generic, like, what do I need to know about today? It doesn't have to be anything like revolutionary or deep or anything. Regardless of what the question is, 2 cards or more in response to that question. Get away from the single card draws as quickly as you can. That is my advice for someone who's just starting to learn tarot. I really like this tag, and I hope that you've enjoyed this tag too. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I will see you all again soon, and I look forward to more VRs to this tag. And thank you to Lady Knight of Avalon for making it. Bye.